Reading 23 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 1. Birdlip, October 23, 1941. Wrong Work of Centers. Part 2. Last time we spoke of wrong work of centers from the point of view of using wrong divisions of centers and from the principle of attention. As was said, people inhabit or live in small divisions of centers, that is, in mechanical divisions. You must understand that all the different I's in us live in smaller or larger divisions of centers. That is to say, we have more mechanical or less mechanical I's. In the small divisions, in the mechanical or even automatic parts of centers, dwell most of the I's that control our ordinary life. In this sense, people inhabit or live in small mechanical divisions of centers. That is, our ordinary life is largely controlled by very little mechanical I's that inhabit these small subdivisions of centers. These should be servants and not our masters, for we have I's of different power or quality or capacity. For example, the I's that live in small subdivisions of centers are incapable of understanding this work. They are very limited. They cannot change. They are like peasants who suspect anything new. The little I's that you use in ordinary life, the I's that quarrel and feel discontented, that are occupied with little plans, little suspicions, little things, little interests, and so on, are in mechanical parts of centers. They are quite useful for little things, but they cannot understand the work. They belong to little parts of centers. And sometimes you find people who are so much in these small daily I's that they are incapable of understanding anything save what belongs to their immediate small interests and to the outlook of these little I's that occupy themselves only with the small things of daily life, which are very important on that scale, namely on the scale of small things. That is to say, these little small I's have their right place, and if they deal with what belongs to them, they do their work as they should. And everyone must possess trained I's of this sort. As you know, a person must be developed to some extent in all parts of centers in order to become number 4 man, or balanced man. But as was said, these small I's cannot grasp this work. They cannot adapt themselves to the ideas of this work. And if the work ideas fall only on these little, small, daily life I's, the work cannot be received and rightly placed in a person's being. In short, this work, if taken in only by these small, self-interested daily I's, will only be understood at their own small level of understanding, at the level of being of these little I's. This work must fall on bigger I's and never be allowed to sink to small I's. This is a very real and important side of work on oneself. That is, it is very important not to let small I's living in small parts of centers think and decide about the ideas of this work. Since this is so important, and from a practical point of view, constitutes so direct an example of the wrong work of centers, which is the subject we are now studying, we must try to understand better what is meant. For, as was said, the study of wrong work of centers is not merely a matter referring to the wrong use of a center, such as using the thinking center for running quickly downstairs, in which case one will fall, but also a question of using the right part of a center in relation to what has to be done at any particular time. For there are quite different kinds of things that we are called upon to deal with at different times, and we possess not only different centers or minds, the intellectual for complex comparisons and thoughts, the moving for complex movements, far quicker than thought, the emotional foreseeing the quality of things and relations and meanings hidden from the intellectual, and so on. But each center is divided and subdivided into parts, each having its right place in the scheme of things and its proper function. To return to the intellectual center, the mechanical part includes in itself all the work of registration of memories, associations, and impressions, and this is all the work it should be doing normally. That is, when the other centers and parts of centers are doing their proper work. It should only do the work of registration or recording, like a secretary taking down what is said and arranging it, etc. And, as was said, it should never reply to questions addressed to the whole center, and should never decide anything important. But unfortunately, it is always deciding and always replying in its narrow, limited way, with ready-made phrases. And it continues to say the same things and work in the same mechanical ways under all conditions. This is the fixed part of a man, and when a man dwells intellectually in the mechanical divisions of intellectual center, he will not change, and nothing can be new in him. But he will see life always in a certain way and say the same things like a gramophone. But if he has another part of him developed in a larger division, the case will be quite different. He will then have a very mechanical dead side and a different side that is more conscious and living, namely, that lies in either the emotional or intellectual divisions. Actually, a balanced man, in the work sense, is developed to some extent in all parts, mechanical, emotional, and intellectual, of all centers. That is, he is represented in them by some eyes, and they are not like empty rooms. This distributes his energy and brings the psychic life into harmony, but it is only through ideas similar to those of this work, namely ideas coming from sea influences, from the conscious circle of humanity, from those who have reached full internal stature, that the harmonious development of centers is possible. Life interests alone are bound to lead to one-sided development, and no man can develop only through self-interest, for then he will only develop certain parts of emotional center. Now, if the work falls on the mechanical side of the intellectual center, it will fall among eyes that deal with the ordinary, daily affairs of life. These eyes are fed by A influences and are for use in life, and they cannot understand what the work is about or why the work is necessary. They are turned to outer visible life, which is the sum total of reality for them. For them, only what they can see and touch is real. There is, therefore, no soil for the work ideas to grow from. For the work is not about the things of sense that can be seen or handled, but begins with self-observation, that is, with what cannot be seen or handled. So you will understand how dangerous it is for those who have been given the opportunity of receiving the work in larger parts of centers, in bigger eyes, to allow its ideas to fall down in themselves into little mechanical eyes, where they will be divided or even turned to bits, as it were. This is really the basic idea in sacrilege or profanation. That is, it belongs to wrong work of centers. The work must always be thought about with attention, for this puts a man into intellectual parts of centers. As regards the hearing of the ideas of the work with little narrow eyes, you all know the parable about the sower and the seed. The person who lives only in very small parts of centers, in little personal things, on hearing this work will only understand it in a very little, small way. This situation is mentioned in the parable. The seed means the ideas of esotericism, the ideas of this work. If the ideas of this work fall as living seeds, on very small eyes, on very little parts of centers inhabited by very small, very little eyes, it is as if the seed, that is, the ideas of this work, fall by the wayside. Let us remind ourselves of this parable. The sower went forth to sow his seed, and as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and it was trodden underfoot, and the birds of the heaven devoured it. And others fell on the rock, and as soon as it grew, it withered away, because it had no moisture. And others fell among thorns, and the thorns grew with it and choked it. And other fell into the good ground, and grew, and brought forth fruit 100-fold. Luke 8, verse 8. In interpreting this parable to his disciples, Christ says, "The seed is the word of God, and those by the wayside are they who have heard. Then cometh the devil, and taketh away the word from their heart, that they may not believe and be saved." Do you understand why it is called the wayside? It means that the ideas of the work fall amid the traffic of one's mind, among the ordinary thoughts of one's life, and are taken in the mechanical side of the mind, which Christ calls the devil, for mechanicalness is the devil. Now, you all know that in the work sense, a person can only understand at his level of being. This means that if you meet a man on a higher level of being than your own, you will not understand him. And if you live in very little, very small, very limited mechanical eyes, then that represents your level of being. You will then only understand what is very small, very little, very personal, and as was said, if you center yourself on these little eyes, these small eyes that relate to the small business of your daily life, and to your little jealousies, little hatreds and desires and meannesses, you will be unable to adapt yourself to anything new. So the ideas of the work will fall by the wayside, and either be quite meaningless to you, or even ridiculous, silly, unnecessary, and fantastic. This means that you will understand the work at this level of your being. But everyone has a scale of being. That is, a man has, provided he has magnetic center, a better level and better eyes in him, if he tries to find them, through which to understand the work. And one sign of this is the possession of magnetic center, which can distinguish between A influences and B influences.